Hello, my friends. Hello, and welcome once again to Stately Vaughan Manor, where Roger and I have returned. And we don't have a lot of time today because I lost track of time. And so I don't have time to do the video I was going to do, which is Roger's Random Book Show, which is a show that usually runs about a half an hour. And I don't have that kind of time. So, real short one today. I would like to say that I lost track of time because of work or something like that. But actually, I was just reading a Doc Savage novel, and then I was like, "Oh, damn! Look at the time." It was a good book, Roger. It was a good one. Anyway, today instead we're going to do another horror mayhem video, but in this one, I'm going to let you choose my next horror mayhem book. And I don't have time to do a thumbnail either, so this is going to be the thumbnail. This is going to be it. Maybe this would be better. Yeah, that's going to be better. I'll do that one, Roger. Anyway, yes, you get to choose the book. For Horror Mayhem, right at this very moment, I'm reading this book by Brian Lumley. This is The Whisperer and Other Voices. The Whisperer and Other Voices, which is a collection of short stories by Brian Lumley. Brian Lumley never disappoints. He's always good in his, trashy way. I really like Brian Lumley a lot. So yes, The Whisperer and Other Voices. I'm going to read this, or I am reading this at the moment. I read the first story. I just started this, but after this, I'm going to have to continue with the Mayhem. So, of course, Horror Mayhem is a reading event created by the Bookish Bryants, which celebrates short horror fiction. And this is a book of short horror fiction. And I have some other books of short horror fiction, and I don't know which one to read next, so I'm going to let you choose. So let's take a look at these books, and you can tell me which one I should read after I finish Brian Lumley. So, here are the choices. I've narrowed them down to these. The first one is a book I've been wanting to read for a couple years and just haven't gotten to it. It is Charles Bowmont, Night Ride and Other Journeys. Charles Bowmont was a really, really excellent writer of horror, fantasy, and science fiction. He was one of those writers you really couldn't pin down. So he was one of those writers kind of like, Ray Bradbury or Harlan Ellison or Richard Matheson, who, he's one of those guys who wrote a bunch of different kinds of things. And his stories usually have a very Twilight Zone feel, which is appropriate because he wrote a lot of great Twilight Zone episodes. And this is a collection of his stories, which I've intended to get to. So should I read this one? In the comments down below, you give me your choices, please. Should it be Charles Bowmont in Night Ride and Other Journeys? Remember, don't play peekaboo with nightmares. Don't. So this is the first choice. Here's the second choice. This is John W. Campbell Jr.'s Who Goes There? Who Goes There, of course, was the story that became The Thing. The film's The Thing. The first one, which was released in the 1950s, The Thing from Another World, which was awesome. If you haven't seen the original version of The Thing, you should. It's great. About a giant killer carrot. It's amazing. But of course, the 1980s version of The Thing is a masterpiece. And it was based on this story. And the 1980s version is a lot closer to the original story. But this book is Who Goes There and Other Stories. Shocking, suspenseful science fiction. It's shocking and suspenseful. So, I haven't read the other stories in this volume. I have read Who Goes There, although it's been a while. And some of my co-hosts in Horror Mayhem, who I'll link down below, some of my co-hosts in Horror Mayhem, I think, have read Who Goes There for Horror Mayhem this year. So yeah, Horror Mayhem, Who Goes There? John W. Campbell. John W. Campbell, should I read this book? Let me know. That's choice number 2. Choice number 3. Here's another book that I've intended to read for a long time by a Polish writer who is very highly regarded. This is The Dark Domain. The Dark Domain by Stefan Grabinski. Stefan Grabinski, so he was a Polish writer who wrote horror stories. And I don't remember if I've ever read anything by him. I can't remember if any of his stories were in that big old anthology, The Weird. I just can't remember. It's possible he was in there, but I don't remember for sure. I think that's probably the only place I would have read a story by him, other than this collection. But I really should read this collection, and I think it would be perfect for Horror Mayhem. So yeah, The Dark Domain by Stefan Grabinski. Stefan Grabinski. Should I read this book? Let me know. All right, choice number 4. We're going to get classy now, Roger. This is some classy stuff. I just got this as a gift recently. This is from Oxford, the Oxford University Press. Horror Stories, Classic Tales from Hoffman to Hodgson, edited by Daryl Jones. So classy stuff. It's classic horror, which I love. I love classic horror. And look at that cover. This looks great. So old-timey horror. Should I read this book next? Let me know. It looks pretty fantastic. Now, this next one is a book I read a version of, but this edition is a little bit different. This is Demons by Daylight by Ramsey Campbell. This is that crazy hippie Ramsey Campbell there on the back cover of this book. So this is the original first edition of Demons by Daylight, which is a teensy tiny bit different than the paperback version that I have read. And I think it's only one story or 2 stories different. I'll have to, if I end up reading this, I'll go through the contents and I'll tell you the difference in my weekly reading report. But it's a slight difference. And of course, to make things even more confusing, there is an ebook version of this, which is even more different as far as the contents are concerned. But this is the original first edition from Arkham House of Demons by Daylight by Ramsey Campbell, which many consider to be a classic collection of horror and ghost stories from Ramsey Campbell. So Demons by Daylight, first edition. Should I read that one? Let me know. Here's the next choice. This is from a writer I have never read at all, which kind of intrigues me. This is Barry Lee DeJesus. This is Black City Skyline and Darker Horizons. This was sent to me by Hippocampus Press. It was published in 2022, so this is the newest book that I have. And it has an introduction by T.E.D. Klein, which is a good sign because he's a pretty great writer, and he was the editor of Twilight Zone magazine way back in the day. He knows good stuff when he sees it, I think. So yeah, I'm interested in reading this. Should I read Black City Skyline and Darker Horizons? Let me know if this should be my next read. Now, this book I chose because recently, at the beginning of Horror Mayhem, I read an anthology that took place, or actually not took place, that was published in the 1970s. So it had stories from 1975 and 1976 in it. But this is an anthology of all 1970s stories. So A Century of Horror, 1970 to 1979. The greatest stories of the decade. I like those 1970s stories. I want to read more from the 70s. Now this was from what was going to be a series of books that collected horror stories from the 20th century. But this is the only one that was ever published, to my knowledge. I think this is the only one they ever did, which was the 1970s volume. So I have this, and it looks fantastic. So should I read A Century of Horror, 1970 to 1979, the greatest stories of the decade? This is edited by David Drake. So he usually knows good stories when he sees them. So this looks to be a good anthology. So there you go. Should I journey back to the 1970s? Should I? And the last choice I have here is more pulp. It's more pulp, this time from the 1930s, right? Yeah, 1931. This is the first issue of Strange Tales. It's a reproduction of the first issue of Strange Tales. Apparently, there were only a few issues of Strange Tales. This was a Weird Tales knockoff, which apparently was not as successful as Weird Tales. And I think I probably have all of them, because I have a few of these, only a few, but apparently it only lasted like 8 or 9 issues or something. And I think that's what I've got, so I have to double check. But this is the first issue. So should I read more Pulp? More Pulp. You can never have too much Pulp. So there you go. Strange Tales. Strange Tales. So out of those books, which one should I read next? You let me know. Put it down in the comments. Let me know, and hopefully it'll be good. I think all of these are going to be good, but you let me know which one I should read next. I will catch you tomorrow for Epic Comic Book Wednesday. It's going to be fantastic, as it always is. And a big announcement video coming up later on in the week for the greatest BookTube event that takes place in June. Okay, guys, I will catch you next time.